Captain Veltar gripped his command chair as another plasma blast rocked the peaceful dawn. The trading vessel groaned like a wounded animal, its hull plate screaming under the assault. Through the bridge's main viewport, he could see the Vexnori raider ships closing in like hungry predators, their black holes bristling with weapons that should have been banned from civilized space decades ago. Captain, forward shields are collapsing. His navigation officer's voice pitched higher with each word. He was young, barely out of the merchant academy, and had never seen real combat. None of them had. The crimson emergency lights cast everything in a hellish glow as sparks erupted from overloaded consoles. Veltar's forearms danced across his controls, trying to squeeze every last bit of power from their dying engines. His people were peaceful traders who carried exotic spices and rare minerals between worlds, not soldiers trained for war. "Engineering, give me everything you've got," he barked into his comm. "Captain, the engines are already at 101.11. 10%, came the panicked reply. "Any more, and we'll lose life support." Through the chaos, Veltar watched the lead raider ship position itself directly ahead. Its captain was toying with them, savoring the hunt. The Vexnari were known throughout the galaxy as slavers and murderers, who sold their captives to the worst criminal organizations in known space. They didn't just want the cargo, they wanted the crew. Another barrage hit them, and this time, Veltar felt the artificial gravity flicker. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut throughout the ship as atmosphere began venting from the lower decks. His cargo of Andromedan silk and Centauri crystals meant nothing now. The only thing that mattered was keeping his crew alive. "Shields at 8% and falling," shouted his tactical officer, a veteran spacer whose usual comm had cracked. "Completely, Captain. They're charging their main cannons. If they hit us with those... Veltar didn't need him to finish. Those plasma cannons could vaporize a ship their size in seconds. He'd seen the aftermath of Vexnari raids before and nothing left but scattered debris and the screams of those unlucky enough to be taken alive. "Sir, incoming transmission from the lead raider," his communications officer reported, her tentacles trembling as she worked her console. On screen, the hideous visage of a Vexnari commander filled the main display. Scales covered his reptilian face, and his yellow eyes gleamed with cruel intelligence. When he spoke, his voice carried the arrogance of a predator addressing prey. "Pathetic merchants," he hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "I am Commander Vexaloom of the Crimson Fang. Surrender now, and I promise your deaths will be quick. Resist, and you'll spend your remaining days in the slave pits of Zarian Prime." Veltar's blood ran cold. He'd heard stories about Zarian Prima. Nightmare world, where captured beings were worked to death in radioactive mines. But as he looked around his bridge at his terrified crew, something hardened inside him. "We're not giving up," he said quietly. "Cut transmission. It's communications." Officer looked at him with wide eyes. "Sir, they'll kill us all." "Maybe, but I'd rather die fighting than live as their slaves." He turned to face his crew. "Send out distress calls on all frequencies. Everything we've got." "Captain," his communications officer whispered, "should I include the restricted channels?" Veltar hesitated. The Deathworlder frequencies were forbidden by galactic law. Every civilized species knew that humans were savage primitives who solved problems with violence and had no place in polite society. Contacting them was considered barbaric, desperate, but as another plasma blast tore through their rear shields, Veltar realized they were past the point of civilization. "Do it. Send the call to everyone, including the humans." His crew exchanged nervous glances. Everyone had heard the stories about humanity, a species so violent they'd nearly destroyed their own homeworld before discovering faster-than-light travel. They were the boogeymen of the galaxy, Deathworlders who treated warfare like an art form. "Emergency broadcast sent on all frequencies, sir," his communications officer reported, "including the forbidden channels." The message raced through subspace, at faster-than-light speeds, carrying their coordinates and a desperate plea for help. As it traveled toward the inner systems, Veltar could only hope someone decent would hear it. Meanwhile, in the depths of space near Earth's solar system, Lieutenant Commander Park Hyon-woo was finishing his night shift at Deep Space Monitoring. Station Omega. The young officer had been tracking routine merchant traffic when his console erupted with priority alerts. What the hell? He muttered, his coffee cup freezing halfway to his lips as the universal translator processed the incoming message. The transmission was chaos-screaming voices, weapon fire, and underneath it all, a captain's desperate plea for anyone who could hear him. Park's training kicked in as he analyzed the signal's origin point. Outer spiral, near the disputed territories where pirates operated with impunity, but these weren't ordinary pirates. As the tactical data streamed in, Park's expression grew grim. Illegal plasma weapons, ship configurations matching known slaver operations, multiple civilian vessels under attack. Son of a bitch, he whispered, reaching for his emergency cum. Within minutes, the alert had reached Admiral Kim Tae-ho aboard the battleship Thunderstrike. The grizzled veteran had been reviewing patrol schedules when the priority message arrived. As he read the report, his weathered face showed no emotion. But his staff officers could see the deadly calm that always preceded the Admiral's most decisive actions. "Commander Lee," he called to his fleet coordinator, a sharp-eyed woman who'd served with him for over a decade. "Yes, sir?" "How long to reach these coordinates at maximum burn?" Commander Lee Sora's fingers flew over her tactical display. 18 hours, sir? But we'd be operating at the edge of our fuel reserves. Make it 12 hours. Signal all ships in the sector we're going to war. As klaxons began wailing throughout the human fleet, Veltar could only pray that someone had heard their call. The Vexnari were closing in. The time was running out. The human fleet tore through hyperspace like death itself had been unleashed. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of the Thunderstrike. Watching the swirling blue energies of faster-than-light travel stream past the viewports, round him, his crew worked with the deadly efficiency that had made Earth's military feared. Across 3 sectors of the galaxy. "Admiral, all ships report ready for combat," announced Commander Lee Sora, her fingers dancing across tactical displays that showed the positions of 15 heavy cruisers, 42 destroyers, and 60 support vessels. It was the largest battle fleet Earth had deployed since the Centauri Wars, and every ship bristled with weapons that could crack planets. Kim nodded grimly as he studied the intelligence reports, streaming across his personal screen. The Vexnari weren't just pirates looking for easy cargo scores. These reptilian monsters had turned slavery into an art form, capturing entire populations and selling them to the criminal underworld. Their victims ended up in radioactive mines, illegal fighting pits, or worse places that decent beings didn't talk about. "Sir, we're picking up more distress signals," reported Lieutenant Choi Min-ho from the sensor station. The young officer's face was pale as he processed the incoming data. 6 additional ships under attack. Maybe more. Kim's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ground together. This wasn't a simple raid, it was a harvesting operation. The Vexnari were treating an entire trade route like their personal hunting ground, scooping up innocent beings like fish in a net. "Captain Jung, bring us to battle stations," Kim ordered into his cum. Throughout the fleet, klaxons began wailing as nearly 50,000 human warriors prepared for war. These weren't conscripts or weekend soldiers, they were professional killers who'd volunteered to protect the innocent, no matter what species they happened to be. On the bridge of the destroyer Relentless, Captain Jung Do-yoon watched his weapons officer check and recheck their targeting systems. The young captain had grown up hearing stories about the old Earth Wars, back when humans fought each other instead of standing united against the darkness between the stars. "Sir, all missile tubes loaded with armor-piercing warheads," his weapons officer reported. "Point defense systems online, railguns charged and ready." Yang nodded, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing their target zone. Somewhere ahead. In normal space, monsters were hurting innocent people. That was all he needed to know. Meanwhile, aboard the hospital ship Mercy, Dr. Kim Hae-won supervised the preparation of emergency medical bays. The veteran surgeon had seen the aftermath of Vexnari, raids before broken bodies and shattered minds that took years to heal, if they ever did. Her medical teams worked frantically to prepare for the worst, because humans didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to save everyone they could. "Doctor, how many casualties should we prepare for?" asked Nurse Park Jimin, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "All of them," Kim Hae-won replied quietly. "We save every single being. We can. That's what makes us human." Back on the flagship, Admiral Kim received an update that made his blood run cold. Intelligence had identified the Vexnar commander leading this operation, Vexillume the Butcher, responsible for the destruction of at least 40 civilian convoys and the enslavement of over 200,000 beings. The monster had been at the top of Earth's most wanted list for 3 years. "Perfect," Kim muttered, his scarred hands gripping the railing. "I've been looking forward to meeting him." Commander Lee Sora glanced at her admiral with concern. Served with Kim long enough to know that tone meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Sir, tactical estimates suggest we'll outnumber them 3-1. Good, I want them to feel helpless before the end." Far ahead in normal space, the nightmare was already unfolding. Captain Veltar pressed himself against the cold metal wall of the Peaceful Dawn's emergency shelter. Listening to the sounds of cutting torches eating through the hole, his surviving crew members huddled around him, 7 beings out of the original crew of 23. The others were dead or already captured. The first breach came with a hiss of escaping atmosphere. Vexnari warriors poured through the opening like nightmares made flesh, their scaled bodies covered in combat armor that gleamed under the emergency lighting. They moved with the practiced efficiency of creatures who'd done this thousands of times before. "Stay together," Veltar whispered to his crew, knowing it was useless advice. Nothing could protect them from what was coming. Commander Dexvolume entered last, his yellow eyes surveying the terrified captives like a butcher examining livestock at market. The massive Vexnari commander stood nearly 8 feet tall, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been called a smile on a friendlier species. "Pathetic creatures," he hissed, his forked tongue tasting the fear in the air. "Look at them, cowering like prey animals. Will fetch decent prices in the Zarian markets. The pale ones, especially theirs. Always demand for exotic species." One of his subordinates, a smaller Vexnari with ritual scars covering his arms, activated a containment field generator. Blue energy crackled to life, trapping the survivors in a cage of pure force. Veltar had seen these devices before. They were designed to keep captives alive but helpless during transport to the slave markets. "Load them onto Transport 7, Dexvolume ordered. "And be careful with the merchandise. Damaged goods bring lower prices." As the raiders began herding his crew toward the transport tubes, Veltare's hand closed around the small emergency beacon hidden in his palm. He'd activated it hours ago, broadcasting their location and a desperate plea for help on every frequency. He could access even the forbidden channels that supposedly reached the Deathworlder systems. But as he was shoved into the containment field with his surviving crew members, hope felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. The galaxy was a cold, dark place where predators like the Vexnari operated with impunity. Decent species filed diplomatic protests and held committee meetings while monsters harvested the innocent. What Veltar didn't know was that his message had reached a species that didn't believe in committees when lives were at stake. The human fleet was already dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, their ships emerging from faster-than-light travel like avenging angels materializing from the void. "Admiral." Kim studied the tactical display as his sensors painted targets throughout the combat zone. Multiple civilian ships, dozens of Vexnari raiders, and the unmistakable energy signatures of illegal plasma weapons that violated every treaty in known space. "Signal all ships," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "No prisoners unless they surrender immediately. Anyone who hurts innocents in my sector answers to me personally." The human armada began its approach. 67 warships moving in perfect formation toward a confrontation that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. Behind them, Earth's greatest minds had spent decades developing weapons and tactics specifically designed to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Vexnari raiders were about to learn why humans were called Deathworlders and why messing with the innocent in human space was considered a terminal mistake. In the darkness between the stars, Justice was coming at the speed of light. The fabric of space-time shattered like broken glass. One moment, the Vexnari raiders were celebrating their latest haul of captured civilians. The next, reality twisted and warped as massive tears appeared in the starfield around them. What emerged from those rifts in space made even the most hardened raiders freeze in terror. 7. Human warships materialized in perfect geometric formation, their arrival so precisely coordinated that they appeared as a single, devastating entity. The flagship Thunderstrike hung at the center like a steel predator, its hull stretching nearly 2 kilometers and bristling with enough firepower to glass a small planet. Around it, heavy cruisers formed an outer ring, while destroyers and support vessels filled the gaps with mathematical precision. On the bridge of his raider flagship Crimson Fang, Commander Thexvalum watched his tactical displays light up with warnings. Each human vessel radiated energy signatures that made his ship's computers scream in protest. The readings were impossible. Their smallest destroyer packed more raw firepower than his entire fleet combined. "Sir, the energy readings must be wrong," stammered his tactical officer, a young Vexnari whose scales had turned pale with fear. Nothing that size could generate those power levels without tearing itself apart. Thexvel's yellow eyes narrowed as he studied the human formation. He'd heard the stories, of course. Every raider in the galaxy had heard whispers about the Deathworlders from the third planet of Sol. But those were just tales told to frighten. Younglings humans were supposed to be primitive savages who'd barely mastered space travel. Recalibrate. "The sensors," he snarled, though doubt was creeping into his voice. "These readings can't be accurate." But before his crew could comply, every communication channel on every ship in the system suddenly crackled to life.
Ow.
The voice that emerged was calm, professional, and utterly terrifying in its quiet authority. "Vexnari vessels. This is Admiral Kim Taho of the Earth Defense Force. You are in violation of 17 interstellar treaties for genocide conventions and approximately 300 counts of piracy, kidnapping, and slavery. Release your captives immediately and surrender, or face the consequences." The transmission was flawless, galactic common, spoken with the precision of someone who'd spent years studying alien languages. But underneath the diplomatic words, every being in the system could hear something else. The promise of absolute violence from a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Dexfall's bridge fell silent. His crew of hardened killers and slavers looked to their commander with something approaching panic in their eyes. The human fleet hung in space like a collection of sleeping giants, each ship radiating barely contained power. "They're bluffing," Dexvalum declared, though his voice cracked slightly. "Deathworlders are just primitive barbarians. They probably cobbled those ships together from scrap metal and desperation." His second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Crixtal, studied the tactical readouts with growing alarm. "Sir, their formation is perfect. Military academy, perfect. And those energy signatures, I've never seen anything like them." "Sensor ghosts," Dexvalum snapped. "They're using some kind of amplification technology to make their ships look more dangerous than they are." But even as he spoke, he could see the doubt in his subordinate's eyes. The human fleet wasn't just powerful. It was organized with a level of discipline that spoke of a military tradition spanning millennia. Each ship held its position with microscopic precision, creating interlocking fields of fire that would turn any aggressor into expanding plasma clouds. Aboard the Thunderstrike, Admiral Kim studied the raider positions with the cold calculation of a chess master planning checkmate. His weathered face showed no emotion as he processed tactical data, but his crew could see the deadly focus in his eyes. "Admiral, we're reading 7 captured civilian vessels," reported Commander Lee Sora from her position at the tactical console. "Estimate between 200 and 300 hostages total." Kim nodded grimly. Standard Vexnari operating procedure: capture everyone they could, sort the valuable slaves from the workers later. The monsters treated sentient beings like cargo, something to be bought and sold in the dark markets of the galaxy's criminal underbelly. "Sir, the raider commander is refusing to respond to our surrender demand," announced the communications officer. Then we provide additional motivation, Kim replied quietly. Commander Lee, target selection? Yes. Lee Sora's fingers danced across her displays, identifying a suitable demonstration target. Asteroid cluster, bearing 2 said Mark IV. Largest rock is approximately 800 meters diameter. Perfect. Signal cruisers 4 through 9 coordinated strike. Full power. Throughout the human fleet, weapons officers powered up their primary beam arrays. The technology was decades ahead of anything the Vexnari possessed focused. Particle beams that could cut through planetary crusts or deliver surgical strikes with pinpoint accuracy. Firing solution locked, reported the weapons officer aboard. The cruiser defiant. Similar confirmations came from 5 other heavy cruisers as they aligned their primary batteries. Fire. 6 beams of coherent energy lanced out simultaneously, converging on the target asteroid with mathematical precision. The rock, roughly the size of a small moon and composed of dense metallic ore, simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no spectacular fireworks, just a brief flash of light as matter. It's converted directly to energy, where a massive asteroid had floated moments before. Only glowing particles remained, slowly dispersing into the cosmic void. The demonstration had its intended effect. Aboard every Vexnari vessel, creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for decades suddenly found themselves confronting a power they couldn't comprehend. The humans had just vaporized 800 meters of solid rock without apparent effort, using only 6 ships from a fleet of 60-7. Captain Veltar, watching from the containment field aboard the Crimson Fang, felt his 4 hearts skip beats in perfect synchronization. The massive asteroid had been there one moment, gone the next. The humans hadn't just answered his desperate call for help, they'd brought enough firepower to turn the entire raider fleet into cosmic dust. By the infinite void, whispered one of his crew members, pressing her face against the energy barrier. They actually came. The Deathworlders actually came for us. Around them, Vexnari guards who'd been confidently preparing to transport their captives to slave markets now looked like terrified children. Their weapons, illegal plasma rifles that could punch through starship holes, suddenly seemed like toys compared to the forces arrayed against them. Commander Vexvaloom stared at the empty space where the asteroid had been, his reptilian brain struggling to process what he'd witnessed. The tactical computers confirmed what his eyes refused to believe: the humans had just demonstrated the ability to delete matter from existence using weapons that operated on principles his species didn't even understand. Sir, his tactical officer whispered, "What are your orders?" For the first time in his career of violence and cruelty, Dexvaloom found himself facing an enemy that made him feel like prey. The human fleet hung in space like a collection of sleeping dragons, each one capable of reducing his flagship to component atoms, but pride and arrogance had carried him this far. He was Dexvaloom the Butcher, terror of the spaceways, not some cowering merchant captain begging for mercy. "All ships prepare for battle," he snarled, though his voice shook with the first fear he'd felt in decades. "If these Deathworlders want a fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget." What he didn't realize was that the humans were counting on exactly that response. They'd given him one chance to surrender, one opportunity to avoid the consequences of his actions. Now that he'd chosen violence, they were free to demonstrate why challenging humanity was considered a terminal mistake. Throughout the galaxy, the real battle was about to begin. Commander Dexvaloom sealed his fate with 4 words: "All ships, attack." Vexnari fleet erupted in a storm of plasma fire. Dozens of illegal cannons unleashed streams of superheated energy that turned the space around the human formation into a deadly light show. The raiders had terrorized civilian shipping for decades with these weapons. Cannons powerful enough to slice through merchant hulls like paper and brutal enough to leave survivors for the slave markets. But the humans weren't helpless merchants, Captain. Jung Du-yoon stood calmly on the bridge of the destroyer, relentless as enemy fire hammered against his shields. The energy barriers flared brilliant blue with each impact, but held firm. His crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who'd trained for this moment their entire careers. Shields holding at 92%, reported his defensive systems officer. "Our plasma cannons are impressive, but they're still using outdated targeting algorithms." Jung smiled grimly. The Vexnari were firing like pirates, all fury and no precision. Human weapons officers, trained in academies that turned warfare into mathematics, picked their targets with surgical care. "Lock onto the lead raider's engine section," Jung ordered. "Fire when ready." The Relentless spoke with the voice of human engineering. Twin railguns, accelerating metallic slugs to significant fractions of light speed, punched through the raiders' shields like they were made of tissue paper. The first shot crippled the vessel's engines. The second turned its weapons array into expanding plasma. Throughout the human fleet, similar scenes played out as Earth's finest demonstrated why they were feared across 3 sectors of the galaxy. The heavy cruiser Thunderbolt rolled smoothly through 3 dimensions, its massive bulk moving with impossible grace as it brought its primary batteries to bear on a cluster of raider vessels. When it fired, space itself seemed to scream. But the Vexnari weren't giving up easily. These were veterans who'd survived hundreds of raids, and they fought with the desperate fury of cornered predators. A group of smaller raider ships attempted to overwhelm the human formation through sheer numbers, diving toward the cruiser Iron Will like a pack of wolves, attacking a lone bear captain. Song Haijin watched them come with the calm detachment of a professional soldier. Her ship was outnumbered 8-1, but the odds didn't concern her. Human warships were built to take punishment and keep fighting. "All-point defense systems, engage incoming targets," she ordered. "Engineering, I need everything you can give me." The Iron Will transformed into a fortress of light and fury. Dozens of automated defense turrets tracked the incoming raiders, filling space with streams of hypersonic projectiles. Most of the attackers died before they could close to effective range, torn apart by defensive fire that moved faster than biological reflexes could follow. But 3 ships made it through the defensive screen. The lead raider, its hull scarred by countless battles, rammed directly into the Iron Will's port side. The impact sent shock waves through both vessels, crushing armor plating and venting atmosphere into the void any other species would have been finished. The collision had breached the cruiser's hull in 6 places, knocked out primary power, filled several decks with toxic gases from the raiders' ruptured fuel lines. But Captain Song wasn't commanding any other species. "Damage." "Report," she called out, ignoring the blood streaming down her face from a head wound. "Hull breaches on decks 4-9, her chief engineer reported. His voice steadied despite the sparks raining down around him. "Emergency power online, backup life support functioning. We can keep fighting, Captain." Blood from her eyes, round her. The bridge crew worked through injuries that would have sent most aliens to medical bays. Broken ribs, concussions, burns from exploding consoles. They treated it all as minor inconveniences. They were humans, descended from a world that had tried to kill them for millions of years. Little pain wasn't going to stop them now. "Target their command section," she ordered. "Let's return the favor." The Iron Will's main guns, still functional despite the damage, spoke with authority. The raider that had rammed them simply disintegrated, its crew vaporized before they could comprehend their mistake. Meanwhile, in the chaos of battle, Lieutenant Commander Park Hyun-woo piloted his rescue shuttle through the deadly crossfire like a man possessed. His mission was simple but nearly impossible: reach the captured civilian vessels and extract the hostages before the raiders could execute them. "Shuttle Mercy, you're flying straight into a combat zone," crackled his cum. "Recommend you wait for fire suppression." "Negative control," Park replied, banking hard to avoid a stream of plasma fire. "Those civilians don't have time for us to clear the area first." His co-pilot, Sergeant Kim Minjin, gripped his harness. As their shuttle performed maneuvers that pushed the limits of physics, "Sir, we've got 3 raider interceptors closing on our position." "Then we go through them," Park said simply. The rescue shuttle Mercy wasn't built for combat, but it carried the latest in human defensive technology. When the raiders opened fire, automated countermeasures filled space with chaff and electronic interference. Park dove toward the captured merchant vessel Peaceful Dawn, using the larger ship's bulk to shield his approach. Aboard the civilian ship, Captain Veltar watched through the containment field as explosions lit up the space around them. The The human rescue shuttle seemed impossibly small compared to the massive warships battling overhead, but it moved with purpose that spoke of absolute determination. "They're actually coming for us," whispered one of his crew members. "They're risking their lives to save complete strangers." The Vexnari guards were beginning to panic. Their raid had turned into a nightmare of human efficiency and firepower. Ships they'd considered invincible were being systematically destroyed by enemies who fought like machines possessed by demons. Park's shuttle docked with the civilian vessel, with a precision that spoke of thousands of hours of training. Within seconds, his rescue team was cutting through the ship's hull, while his gunners provided covering fire. The humans moved like clockwork, each knowing exactly what their teammates would do next. "Hostiles neutralized," reported Corporal Lee Dayoung as the last Vexnari guard fell to stunner fire. Civilians secure and ready for extraction, but the rescue was just beginning. Throughout the combat zone, similar operations played out as human forces demonstrated that they fought not just to destroy enemies, but to save lives. Every civilian vessel had its own rescue team. Every hostage had someone coming for them. The battle itself was becoming a rout. Vexnari ships that had terrorized merchant lanes for decades found themselves outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely overwhelmed. Human tactics were unlike anything they'd encountered, three-dimensional warfare that used physics itself as a weapon. The destroyer, Defiant, performed a maneuver that should have been impossible for something its size, spinning end over end while maintaining perfect fire control. Its captain, Commander Yoon Soo-jin, had grown up in Earth's asteroid mining colonies, where three-dimensional thinking was a survival skill. "Target their flagship," she ordered. "Let's end this." Commander Thexvalum watched his fleet die around him with growing horror. These weren't the primitive savages he'd expected. These were apex predators from a world that had forged them in violence and death. Every human ship fought like it was personally offended by the raiders' existence. "Sir, we've lost 70% of our force," his tactical officer reported, his voice breaking. "Recommend immediate retreat." But there was nowhere to run. Human ships had positioned themselves at every possible escape route, their captains thinking several moves ahead like chess masters playing a game. Dexalum was only beginning to understand. Within 2 hours of the first shot, the mighty Vexnari raider fleet was nothing but expanding debris clouds and emergency beacons. The few survivors found themselves in human custody, facing justice for crimes that spanned decades. The battle was over, but the real victory was just beginning. Every civilian they'd saved, every life they'd protected, every monster they'd stopped, this was why humanity had reached for the stars. Not for conquest or glory, but to ensure that decent beings everywhere could sleep safely in the dark. The galaxy would remember this day. The raiders would spread the word, hurt the innocent, and face the wrath of the Deathworlders. "Captain?" Veltar had never experienced anything like the human medical bay aboard the hospital ship Mercy. The pristine white walls hummed with technology that seemed to read his very DNA, while machines he couldn't even name worked to heal injuries he'd thought would be permanent. His shattered arm, broken during the Vexnari boarding, was already showing signs of accelerated healing thanks to human nanomedicine. "Try to move your fingers," said Dr. Kim Hae-won, her gentle voice a stark contrast to the terrifying efficiency humans had shown in battle. She was checking his arm with a device that projected holographic images of his bone structure in real time. Veltar flexed his digits, amazed to find them responding normally. "This is impossible. My species takes months to heal fractures like this." "Human medicine focuses on rapid field treatment," the doctor explained, making notes on a tablet that seemed to respond to her thoughts. "We learned long ago that getting people back on their feet quickly often means the difference between life and death around them." The medical bay buzzed with activity as human medics treated rescued civilians from a dozen different species. Veltar watched in fascination as they worked on beings whose biology they'd never encountered before, yet somehow knew exactly how to help. Crystalline from the outer worlds was having her shattered mineral structure repaired with sonic resonance therapy. A gas-breathing nebula dweller floated in a custom atmosphere tank while medics treated his radiation poisoning. "How do you know how to treat so many different species?" Veltar asked. Dr. Kim smiled. "We study Every species we encounter, every biology we discover, we learn how to help them. Knowledge saves lives, and saving lives is what we do. The medical bay doors hissed open, and Veltar's four hearts nearly stopped as Admiral Kim Tae-ho entered. The man who'd commanded the destruction of an entire raider fleet looked somehow different, now his stern military bearing softened by genuine concern for the rescued captives. "Captain Veltar," Admiral Kim said, approaching the bed with the careful movements of someone trying not to appear threatening. "How are you feeling?" I'm alive, thanks to you," Veltar managed, still trying to process everything that had happened. "Admiral, I must ask, queer strangers from a species you've never encountered before, why did you risk so much to save us?" Kim pulled up a chair beside the bed, his weathered face thoughtful. For a moment he seemed to be searching for the right words. Finally, he spoke in a voice that carried the weight of absolute conviction, because it was the right thing to do. "Where I come from, good people don't stand by while innocents suffer. It doesn't matter what species you are, what planet you call home, or whether we've ever met before. When someone needs help, you help them. That's what separates civilization from barbarism." Veltar stared at this legendary warrior, this Deathworlder, who commanded enough firepower to crack planet sand, saw something he hadn't expected. Compassion. Not the calculating mercy of a politician, or the condescending charity of the powerful, but genuine care for the welfare of complete strangers. "Your people must think you're all heroes," Veltar said quietly. Admiral Kim chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Most of our people think we're crazy for charging into danger to save aliens we've never met. But that's fine. We didn't become soldiers for glory or recognition. We do it because someone has to stand between the monsters and the innocent." Over the following days, as Veltar recovered aboard the human hospital ship, he witnessed something that would change his understanding of the galaxy forever. The humans didn't just rescue the captives and leave, they stayed to help, providing medical care, psychological counseling, and even transportation back to home worlds. They treated every rescued being like family, despite having no obligation to do so. News of the battle spread through the galaxy's communication networks faster than light-speed travel. Within a week, every species, from the core worlds to the outer rim, had heard the story. The details varied depending on who was telling it, but the core facts remained the same. A human fleet had destroyed the most feared raider organization in known space to save complete strangers. The political implications were staggering. The Altarian Confederation, Veltar's own government, immediately opened formal diplomatic channels with Earth. Their message was simple: "We want to be your friends." They weren't alone. Species that had previously dismissed humans as violent primitives suddenly found themselves re-evaluating their positions. The Galactic Council, which had spent decades debating whether to grant humanity full membership, quietly fast-tracked the application. Council members who'd once called humans barbaric Deathworlders now spoke of them as efficient peacekeepers. But the most significant change came from Captain Veltar himself. Using his influence as a prominent merchant captain and survivor of the Vexnari raids, he established the Universal Emergency Response Network. The system was elegant in its simplicity. Any species under attack could broadcast undesignated frequencies, and human response fleets would investigate immediately. "It's not just about military response," Veltar explained to the assembled delegates during the network's inaugural ceremony. "It's about knowing that somewhere in the darkness, someone cares enough to help. The humans have shown us that civilization isn't about technology or philosophy. It's about the willingness to protect those who can't protect themselves." The network's first test came just 3 months after its establishment. Slavers attacked a peaceful colony on the rim of Andorian space, expecting easy prey. Instead, they found themselves facing 2 human heavy cruisers that had responded to the colony's distress call within hours. Word spread quickly through the criminal underworld. Attacking innocent civilians was no longer a profitable enterprise. Human response times were measured in hours, not days or weeks. Their firepower was overwhelming. Their tactics were flawless. They showed no mercy to those who hurt the defenseless. Piracy rates in human-patrolled sectors dropped by 90%. Within the first year, crime syndicates began avoiding regions where human ships might respond to distress calls. The galaxy's most dangerous criminals learned a simple truth. You could run from many things, but you couldn't run from human justice. Years later, Sveltar watched his own children play safely in parks that existed only because human ships kept the darkness at bay. He reflected on that terrible day when raiders had nearly destroyed everything he loved. The call for help he'd sent into the void had changed more than just his own fate, had changed the galaxy itself. In the depths of space, where predators had once roamed freely, a new order had emerged. Not an empire built on conquest or domination, but something far more powerful. The simple promise that good people would always stand against evil, no matter the cost. The age of unchallenged piracy was over. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they'd brought something the galaxy had almost forgotten: hope, backed by unstoppable force. From the core worlds to the outer rim, from the smallest mining station to the largest trading hub, being slept more peacefully, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, human ships patrolled the void. They fought not for territory or resources, but for something more precious than either: the right of innocent beings to live without fear. The galaxy would never be the same. The humans had made sure of that. The end.